Let's start with the college football side of things. There was a lot to talk about from a Devy aspect, but I'm going to start first with you, Cooper. Was there anything notes-wise or anything that jumped out to you guys or jumped out to you from the college football scene?
Yeah, so for the early slate, one thing that jumped off the page to me is Luther Burden. He looks like he's blossoming into a star wide receiver. So this is a guy that I had concerns about this offseason. I thought for a guy that's as highly drafted as he's been, as highly rated as he's been, because he was a 5-star recruit, has been considered pretty much consensus top 2 in his class, and a lot of people even still had him above Evan Stewart. I've been down on him because I said, look, last year he showed a lot of gadgety stuff. He returned some kicks. He got some rushing attempts. He scored touchdowns in a couple of different ways, but he really didn't show out a ton as a true wide receiver. But this year, he's racking up the targets. He's racking up the catches. He's catching it down the field. He's making plays everywhere. And he is answering a lot of the questions that I had about him with a resounding, yes, I can do it. Thank you very much. On the flip side, Barryon Brown has been disappointing me because he is another guy that is absolutely electric with the ball in his hands. But if you don't ever get the ball in your hands, I mean, it's an issue. So I think the most catches he's gotten a game so far is 4. This week he had 1 catch for 1 yard. To me, a guy who's not getting a lot of catches and not earning a lot of targets shows me that he's not separating consistently. So obviously I haven't had a chance to watch the All-22 yet. But I have concerns about Barryon Brown. Like, he's great with the ball in his hands, but you don't get punts for being don't get fantasy points for being a return specialist. So at some point he's going to have to show me a whole lot more as a true wide receiver, especially with other guys in the class going off like they have been. He's kind of guys that I had him in a tier with this offseason are leaving him in the dust.
I mean, so he's good at returning the ball for touchdowns, but I mean, what else is he doing to get points? I mean, that's a great point.
Yeah, and I love Barryon Brown. I really want to see more out of him than what he's shown me to this point this season. Somebody who has shown me a ton is we've talked about these guys before, the Washington trio. All right, Penix, Odunze, and Jalen McMillan, and you could add Jalen Polk in there, who also looks really good, had over 100 yards this week. They're dominating. And I said last week a game for me to watch was how are they going to do against a Big Ten defense, maybe a step up in competition, although Michigan State looked terrible. So maybe it actually wasn't a step up in competition. I don't know. But I wanted to see how they'd look against a Power 5 school in Michigan State. And Penix had 375 yards and 4 touchdowns at halftime. These guys are killing it. Penix is an early Heisman candidate. He looks like he could contend for QB2 in the class, which I know is a really bold statement because it's felt for a long time like everybody had Drake Maye locked in there. And Drake May's looking a little iffy. He threw 2 pretty questionable interceptions in this one. So Drake Maye still is my QB2. Let me be clear about that. But I don't think that he's so locked in that it's his and nobody else can take it. I think the battle is pretty wide open. So Penix is really getting my attention as a 2024 quarterback, and Odunze, I think, is easily one of the best wide receivers in the draft class.
Yeah, we talked about it. Me and you text back and forth on a Saturday. For somebody that like Drake Maye, that's arguably the QB2, everybody's saying it, right? You need to see him do this versus lower level competition. You need to see him put up the stats, and he's just not doing what you expect him to do versus these lower level competition. Meanwhile, you got guys like Michael Penix versus, these higher level competitions that is putting up the stats. I mean, I think we can begin to maybe have that conversation a little bit.
Yeah, and I mean, to be fair, Drake Maye had over 400 yards passing. He threw 2 touchdowns. But the 2 picks were really bad ones. I mean, I was watching, and they were really terrible decisions. So that's 4 interceptions for him already this year. And, of course, last week against App State, he only threw for about 200 yards with no touchdowns in an overtime game against App State. So that's not what you want to see. So, yeah, he's not killing it. And we had questions about new offensive coordinator, no Josh Downs. How is he going to look? Is he going to keep putting up these video game numbers like he did last year? So far, the answer is no. And that doesn't mean that he's a bad draft prospect, but you want to see him at some point this year look dominant if you think he's going to be a top 5 draft pick. So
Exactly. Well, speaking of quarterbacks and really teams that are struggling, I was left disappointed, just as you were with some of these teams. I was left disappointed with Penn State and Drew Allar. You talk about Drew Allar, I mean, arguably one of the top Devy assets in college football right now. I watched him play versus that Illinois football team, and probably one of his best competitions right now, biggest competitions that he's had up until this point of the season, and he didn't look that good. His ball placement was completely off. He was overthrowing guys. He had happy feet. I mean, he couldn't get his feet planted on some of his throws. I mean, he just didn't look good. The rushing attack couldn't get going. I mean, Nick Singleton finally got that touchdown and got that late, really good pass catching, down the sideline late in I think it was the third or fourth quarter. So the rushing attack finally got it going, but that team as a whole looked pretty atrocious for most of that game. I mean, Illinois had them pretty much dead to rights for most of that game. And I mean, for somebody that's a high level Devy asset like Drew Allar is, I mean, I'm a little concerned with what I saw out of Drew Allar. So
yeah, and it was a good thing that Illinois is awful on offense, because it was like, well, we're not playing well, but they're even worse, so we're just going to cruise to a win. But yeah, it didn't look pretty, and they need to get him some wide receiver help at some point. So, I mean, they've got nobody this year, so hopefully next season through the transfer portal or something, they can get him some wide receiver help.
absolutely. Speaking of wide receivers, though, that won't be available to help, but are a good wide receiver. Can we talk about Malik Nabers, that LSU offense, for a second? Jaden Daniels and Malik Nabers looked phenomenal on Saturday. I mean, Daniels had an 88% completion percentage. He was pretty much putting the ball wherever he wanted to put it. He was up there on the record books for most completion percentage, but almost had most passes completed in a single game. Tied up there with Joe Burrow. Nabers had 13 catches for 239 yards, 2 touchdowns. The dude was getting it done all over the field as a pass catcher. He was going down the field, making plays, winning the contested catches. I mean, me and you were texting back and forth about it, Cooper. I mean, you were playing against him on Saturday, and it feels like every time we were texting, it was like, oh, Malik Nabers did something again. I mean, this is a guy that his stock is up right now. I mean, it's soaring through the roof.
Yeah, I was playing against him in a C2C league, and at halftime I was like, okay, he can chill out now. Like, he's done enough. But yeah, 239 yards and 2 touchdowns is insane. He definitely staked his claim for wide receiver 2 in the class, which is a wide open competition at this point. There's a lot of good guys competing for it. He's an excellent route runner. I'm a big fan of Malik Nabers. As for Jaden Daniels, not sure that I'm buying in on him yet as an NFL prospect. I think his legs make him really great for college production, but he hasn't shown me enough as a passer. And even this season, like, he looked great this week, but if you go and watch the tape against FSU, he looked terrible. So I'm not in on Jaden Daniels as a Devy prospect, but I love Malik Nabers. And this 2024 wide receiver class is looking really good between Odunze and Nabers and Troy Franklin. Just
Marvin
a lot
Harrison.
of guys balling out. And, of course, Marvin Harrison Jr. is who he is. So, yeah.
Well, speaking of guys that you are high on, we're going to move on to our stock up and stock down from a Devy aspect point of view. Give me a stock up guy after watching football on Saturday.
Yeah, Trevor Etienne. He looked fantastic. He's shown flashes of it before. Like, he's got really good footwork. He's really shifty. His vision is good. I think he's got a better lateral agility than his brother Travis. Travis has more straight line speed, but this week is the first time we've really seen him take a huge workload because he's a small guy. He's splitting work with Montrell Johnson. And so that's kind of been the question is can he carry a workload? And this week he took 23 carries. He went for 172 yards and a touchdown. And he looked phenomenal doing it, just busting off huge explosive plays. So Trevor Etienne is a stock up for me in a big way.
Yeah, I mean, I loved everything I saw out of Trevor Etienne. I mean, his contact balance, his lateral agility. I mean, just everything that I watched about him, I loved. I know you mentioned it earlier. You don't like him, but Jaden Daniels is a stock up guy for me after that game. I think it's hard to argue him not being a stock up guy. I don't know if he's going to be a guy that goes, top half of the first round in the NFL draft, but in a class where you've got two quarterbacks that are going 1 and 2, And then it's up for debate who that QB3 is. I think Jaden Daniels can stake his claim as maybe being that guy that could potentially go as a QB3, QB4. I like Jaden Daniels, like I said. I mean, his rushing ability provides a unique asset that he can provide for an NFL team. He made all the throws that I wanted to see him make on Saturday. So he's somebody that I'm monitoring, and he's definitely a stock-up guy for me.
Okay. Yeah, I think if I was chasing that rushing upside in this class, I would probably lean towards KJ Jefferson personally. But I mean, it was a big game, obviously, for Daniels this week. I just need to see more before I bump him up. Right now, he's not. I don't think he's inside my top 10 quarterbacks in his draft class right now. So for me, a guy that's stocked down this week is Braylon Allen. Braylon Allen is. I don't know if you look at the box score. He had 98 yards and 2 touchdowns, and it looks like a pretty good game. He's still getting more receptions than he had last year. But it was most of the way through the third quarter against Georgia Southern. Georgia Southern, not a good football team. No offense, Georgia Southern. He had 4 carries for 16 yards. And Ches Malusi, again, was out touching him. He looks like the clear 1A in that offense, which nobody expected. And Braylon Allen he looks slow. He doesn't look like he has lateral agility. And so for a guy who is as highly touted as Braylon Allen is, like widely considered a consensus top 3 or 4 running back in this draft class, I have not been impressed with him. And we got 3 weeks in a row now where we're well into the second half and he's done nothing. And then he's had a couple of games where he put up some garbage time points. But, yeah, I'm stocked down on Braylon Allen. I'm concerned about him.
He runs upright, and for me, that just bothers me for some reason. I don't like my running backs to run upright. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, his big selling point is his size, and he doesn't use it well. He doesn't have good contact balance for being a big train of a man.
What I did learn Saturday, though, is if you want a guy in college football on your Devy roster to explode, you need to get Matt Cooper to tweet about him.
Because I tweeted, I said, if you're not, it's 4 carries for 16 yards. I said, if you're not concerned about Braylon Allen at this point, then you're just kidding yourself. And as soon as I tweeted that, he scored a touchdown on the next drive. And by the end of the game, he had 98 yards and 2 touchdowns. So
yeah, it's magic.
But I think, honestly, like people who are just looking at box scores are not concerned about Braylon at all. And so I think there's still a sell window there. And he's a guy that I would be looking to sell.
For sure. One stock down guy that I already mentioned is Drew Allar. For somebody that has got such a high Devy stock right now, I want to go and get something for Drew Allar. I mean, I've watched enough of him the last 3 weeks now. I mean, his arm talent is there. You can see how he throws the ball with velocity. He has zip on his ball, but his ball placement, his accuracy is just all over the place at times. His footwork is off. There's just some stuff about Drew Allar that I don't think translates well to an NFL roster. And if you can get what I believe you can get for Drew Allar, he's a sell for me.